What's up everybody, I'm Kirk, welcome back to the channel. Developed by Dirigo Games and published by Hook, Kingdom of the Dead is an indie horror first-person shooter with a very unique pen and paper art style. I've been looking forward to Kingdom of the Dead. I got to play a demo for it last October as part of Steam Next Fest, and I was quite intrigued with it. Suffice it to say, I was most excited when the full version finally scribbled onto my hard drive. So is Kingdom of the Dead worth the ink, or should we crumple this one and toss it in the trash? Well, time to find out. But before all that, if you're new here and you're digging what you're seeing, please consider liking and subscribing to help support this channel. Alrighty, let's get started. Taking place in the late 19th century, in Kingdom of the Dead, you play as Agent Chamberlain, a professor turned army general now working as a G-man for the secret government program Gatekeeper, which is engaged in a hidden war against the invading armies of Death himself. Aiding you in your campaign, a one-eyed demon sword, who himself harbors ill intent towards the world, providing a sardonic and humorous take on each of your missions. First of all, I love the way this game looks. Kingdom sports a hand-drawn pen and ink style, as if it was pulled from the pages of an old Victorian newspaper, or wood-carved ink print. This moody, gothic, monochromatic world is characterized by precise line work and cross-hatching. It's really striking and just plain cool. I found it to be a charming and intelligent choice. Examining things closer, you might see some literal rough edges here and there, but what counts is the overall composition, and hoo-wee is it fun to look at. The only thing that drags the visuals down are the bugs. There were more than enough times I ran into enemies clipping through the geometry and the occasional spazzy texture. This particular shotgunner stuck in the wall here was a consistent bug throughout my playthroughs. Going along with this, there was quite a few spots in the game where the enemies could outright shoot through the walls, a most irksome issue. The worst of it was entire chunks of levels disappearing and reappearing. Granted, what I played was a pre-release build, so hopefully some of this can get sorted out with patches post-release. The soundtrack for this game I dug. A somewhat goofy, repetitive, but head-boppingly catchy electronic score that I felt fit this eccentric, inky world. But sound effects for this game are anemic. Throughout my playthroughs, I was let down by weak sound effects and missing sound effects, both in the environment and in gameplay. Enemies have these low roars that are hard to hear and make almost no noise when moving, making it easy for them to sneak up on you. Some would say it makes it suspenseful. I say it makes it irritating. Guns are rather soft sounding, a mismatch for their otherwise booming, cracking animations. Some of this stems from the mix, which leans way too heavily into the music, often overpowering the already weak sound effects. But as I said, some effects are just flat out missing. Right at the beginning of the game, these zombies smash through these doors, and yet the sound of wood breaking is totally absent. Also, listen to when I kill these beastly Cyclops monsters. Shouldn't we hear this beastie loudly choking on the geyser of blood coming out of its mouth? Ambiance is spotty too. Listen to this area here after I turn the music off. Sure, there's wind and a few seagulls, but why can't I hear more of the water, or the creak of these wooden ships? Wouldn't there be crickets? Perhaps ship horns in the distance? Okay, random distant roar, fair enough. I know I'm being a stickler here, but I'm a big believer that you can get away with average visuals. You can't get away with average sound. It will always undermine any sort of immersion your game is going for. To be fair, there are some pretty good sound effects here. By now, I'm sure you've heard bullets whizzing past your character's head, which sounded nice. And some levels are better about their environmental sounds. But overall, I feel the great art direction of this game deserved a richer sound suite to complement it. The quirky soundtrack is not enough to make up for it. Kingdom of the Dead is made up of 9 missions, taking place in a respectable variety of locales, both industrial and natural. The main goal is the same for each: get in, kill the demon boss, close the gate. You can choose from 3 difficulties, and a big bullet point on the Steam page is that each difficulty adds more goals, giving the game replayability like a 90s shooter. This, however, is a bit of a stretch. On the easiest difficulty, your objective is just to kill the demon and close the gate. On the next one up, it adds a secondary objective, which is basically collecting a random object hidden in an out-of-the-way path. This is the same for each level, and the out-of-the-way path is commonly at the midpoint of the map or a little before the boss, making it a somewhat predictable objective. The hardest difficulty adds the goal that no civilians can die. Each mission has captured civilians scattered throughout that you can save. I love the animation when you free them too. They're like, oh wow, I'm free. Well, see ya. Look at him go to freedom. He'll get there eventually. While saving them is mandatory on the hardest difficulty, they can actually be found and saved on all the difficulties, and their numbers don't change. And the other thing is, I rarely had an issue keeping the civilians alive. Enemies will outright ignore them, and the only time a civilian died was my fault. I turned a corner and accidentally shot one. Sorry, buddy. I should also add that the civilians are not hard to find. They're all on the critical path of the level. So yeah, there's more goals, and technically more replayability, but GoldenEye, this game is not. These added goals are cut and paste filler. They're not terribly substantial. Plus, any skilled FPS player can easily do everything in this game in a solid day. 2 if they take their time. A good thing though is that the hardest difficulty does turn up the heat combat-wise. Enemies are ravenous, and the toughest types make an appearance earlier and in numbers. For me, this difficulty was the most enjoyable, and gave me a great excuse to really push this game's mechanics. Real quick, before we move on, at the end of each mission, you're scored on your performance, as one might expect, but the mission timer appears to be broken. See here? Says it took me 53 minutes to beat this. It wasn't. It was 22 minutes. And I know this because the video file I captured, starting at the beginning of the level and cutting at the finish, was 22 minutes long. Same here. It says I beat this in 5 minutes, it actually took me 30. This didn't always happen, and I'm not sure what's causing it, but I want to give the developer a heads up on this. Moment-to-moment gameplay in Kingdom of the Dead is pretty decent. This is not a super fast-paced shooter, and is a little bit on the floaty side in terms of movement. The shooting, though, is quite snappy and responsive, and popping off the heads of the undead is satisfying. Your arsenal is made up of turn-of-the-century implements that fit the typical FPS types: pistol, shotgun, minigun, etc. Some of them feature alternate fires, and you can pop down the sights, which I often found handy. I like most of the weapons, but the pistol and the rifle are where it's at, mainly for their accuracy and range. Most enemies can be killed by a single headshot, and if your aim is true, you can comfortably sit back and annihilate the sloth-paced dead. Yeah, this does tip Kingdom into the easy side a little more than I would have liked, but the game will throw chargers and projectile shooters at you to snap you out of any comfort, especially on the hardest difficulty. Within your arsenal, you can also use your companion Demon Sword. Get enough kills with him and you can use a powerful special attack. Unfortunately, the sword was not all that fun to use. It feels clunky, and it was often hard to tell how close I needed to be to an enemy to hit them. Pretty much the typical issue with most FPS melee weapons. Kingdom's 9 levels are well designed. There's nice variety to them, and they're fun to travel through and, of course, look at. They have a more wide open design, giving the player a lot of room to move and explore, and exploration is often rewarded with boosts to your health. Best of all, they get better as you go. In fact, the final levels I felt were the strongest of the game, featuring some great surprises and spectacle. As mentioned, each level ends with a boss fight against a fiendish, trash-talking demon. Sad to say though, I found each of the boss fights underwhelming. The biggest issue is that all of them are way too easy, even on the hardest difficulty. Their defenses are almost non-existent, and their attacks typically slow and easy to dodge. On average, I was able to whip through them in a matter of minutes. Seriously, look at me melting through this guy's health meter. The only boss that killed me was actually the first one, but that's because for whatever reason, his attacks are able to one-shot you. Right. Where the battles got tricky is when other enemies would get involved, forcing me to stay on the move. However, all enemies die when the boss is defeated. So for me, it made more sense to ignore them and keep circle strafing and shooting until victory. The best boss fights are a test of your skill, not a speed bump. These fights should have been the highlight of the game. For me though, they ended up being the biggest disappointment. I really wanted to like Kingdom of the Dead. There's a lot of charm and personality here, but at the end of the day, this is a shooter let down by disappointing boss fights, bugs, and lackluster sound. And the promise of replayability is a thin one. If you're able to look past the shortcomings, there's fun to be had with this game for sure, and I really hope the developer delves back in and improves it. But for the hardcore shooter fan, I don't think Kingdom of the Dead will do the trick. What are your thoughts on Kingdom of the Dead? And is anybody else a fan of the hand-drawn art style for FPS games? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I love that it's becoming more common and wouldn't mind seeing it in more titles. And if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and ring the bell for notifications on future uploads. It's a couple clicks for you and a massive help for this channel. And don't be shy, come say hi in the Kirk Collects Discord, linked below. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.